Hi everyone, it's Kelly from Kellie's Bead Boutique. So I've been making and teaching how to make jewelry for a very long time now. And one of the things that I hear all the time is, you make it look so easy. Well, that's because I think it is. So I'm going to take some simple parts and some simple techniques, and I'm going to teach you how to make your very own jewelry. So if you want to see what I'm making today, come and join me. Okay, so for our project today, we're going to be using some 2mm leather. I've also got some S-long cording. I've got a big juicy agate bead, and I've got a crystal rhinestone spacer just for that little bit of extra bling. I've got one of these really large check glass curvy rondelles, and I love these. I think they're so beautiful. We're also going to be using a beautiful tiara cast pendant, and what I love about this pendant is that it's two-sided. So it doesn't matter which way this flips around when you're wearing it, you'll always have something that looks nice, and I think that's a great feature. We're going to be using some 6mm matte gray wood beads. I've got a lobster clasp and some little spacers from Tiara Cast. And I've got these little bead tips that I'm going to be using. I've used those in quite a few projects lately, and everybody loves using them. And I'll make sure to put a link to the website so that you can find these. They're called bead tips, but I always call them the wrong thing in my videos, so I'm trying to make sure to call them the right thing this time, but I will put a link in the description box below. We're going to be using these cord ends that are crimpable. I also have some 8/0 seed beads, and I have a closed ring and some just 4mm 18 gauge jump rings. And for our tools and other products, we're going to be using a little bit of GS Hypo Cement. I've got a pair of cutters and a pair of bent chain nose pliers, a pair of pliers, and a pair of tweezers. So let's get started. First thing I've done is I've cut about 1 meter of my S-long. So one of the things I recommend after you cut this is that you cut it on a sharp angle so that it forms a bit of a needle. Then I recommend taking a bit of your glue and just kind of running it down the end and then sort of cleaning it off with your fingers and let it sort of dry, and that will help create a bit of a needle. These can be a little bit challenging to get through, and so I do find if this is a little stiffer, it does make it a bit easier. But I'm not going to do that today because I don't have time. All right, so we're going to take one end and we're going to run it through the pendant, and I just want to marry these up at the top so that I keep these about equal length. And I'm going to just run my fingers down there, and so we've got that on there like that. And now we're going to do a knot. So the way that I create my knots is I go around my fingers like that. I sort of crisscross, and then I pull that through the hole. So I'm taking both pieces through there. Then I'm going to take my set of tweezers. Now we do sell these in our website, and I think they're like $3.99. They're pretty reasonable, and I use these for everything. All right, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to run it through this hole here, and then I'm going to grab hold of the other two cords that are right there, and I always put it where I want that knot to be. So I want my knot to be right next to the pendant, so I'm just going to pull down. And then I take this and run it down so that it tightens it up. And then now we have that affixed on there, and it looks really cute. Okay, so now we're going to start stacking up our little pendant feature there. So I want to sort of have these about the same length. It doesn't really matter, it just makes it easier to get in there. So I'm going to start with our check glass first. And you can get these two through here, no problem. But like I said, if you make these into a little bit of like a stiffened end, it will make it substantially easier to do this. I end up cutting my pieces quite a bit to try to get it a nice sharp angle, but if you have the time, make sure you stiffen the cording up, and that will help things along. Okay, so all I did was put our gorgeous check glass on there. I've got our rondelle, and then I've got our big nugget bead. Now this nugget bead has a large hole there, so we need to block that, or else we're going to end up having our knot fall through there, and then it's going to float around. So that's what these little beads are for. So I've got this bead here, and I'm going to just run that through the bead. And then that's going to help give us a little sort of stopper of sorts. And then now you can see that's just going to block that up. All right, so now that we've got our stopper on there, we're going to create another knot. So I just kind of let the piece hang down, wrap it around my finger, pull through, And then now I'm going to take my tweezers and I go through this. It's kind of an odd angle to be able to show you, but I'm going to try my best. So I'm going through this loop and then I'm going to grab right where I want to have that knot and I'm going to push down because I want this to be in there nice and snug. So now you want to have that fall over this way, off to the right. If it falls off to the left, you're going to lose your knot. So that's one of the problems that people often have, is that they lose their knot. So you can see that there is actually a knot created right there. So I'm now going to pull up on that. And then I just kind of use my fingers to sort of push down, pull that out, and then run that down and just tighten that up. So now you can see we've created a nice little focal piece just by adding a couple knots there. And I think that looks really pretty. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 9 of my seed beads on either side. So you'll have plenty of seed beads in your kit. We always give extras just in case, you know, your cat jumps up on your table and knocks one over, because that tends to happen, and then you lose it in your carpet and then you can't find your beads. So we always give you, you know, a few extra anyway, so that if one has a blocked up hole or something like that, or you just, you know, there's the odd one that just doesn't want to work. So we always make sure that we provide you with enough to complete your project. So I'm going to put 9 on here. So how many have I got here? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 on one side. And then I'm just going to run that down. So you can see I've got it on one side there. And then I'm going to repeat on the other side. And this necklace does come together fairly quickly, and it's really, really simple. Now I did have one very, very similar to this one a few years ago called the Gypsy Spirit necklace, but it sold out in just a couple weeks, and we had a lot of people ask us if we could recreate that, but I could never find the right things. And so I now had the right things, but just a different color. And then I changed it a bit in the finishing, because it was a little more sort of, as I, you know, I guess it was a little bit more convoluted in how you finished it off. And I was never really happy with that. So now I thought, well, we'll do something a little different. And I think it came out really nicely, and it was much easier to put together, which makes, I want jewelry making to be easy for everybody. So, okay, so now you can see that I've got 9 on each side. Okay, so now I'm going to take my ends and marry them up, and then I'm going to go through this last little spacer bead, and I'm just putting this on to create a little bridge between the next section. So now I want to take that and push it down, because I want it to kind of have a little bit of a loopy sort of look there. So I push down with my thumb, make sure that's in there nice and tight, and now I'm going to create another knot. So I'll do my knot, and then before I tighten that up, so I'm going to push that down so you can see it's created that nice loop there, and then now I'm going to tighten up my knot. And if one is kind of sticking out further than the other, this one isn't, but what I do is I take each side and pull on it, and that will help your knots kind of tighten up. Now I'm going to pull that out and then run my tweezers down, and that locks that in there, and now you can see that that's created that nice little loop, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so now we're going to start with the rest of the necklace. So this one is pretty easy in that I'm just going to be putting a single 8/0 seed bead and then one of my wood beads. Now you can see that sometimes they get a little kind of snugged up in there. Now this is where it really does come in handy if you have made this a little bit stiff on the end. Or if you have a needle that you can use, that will help. If you know, some of the big eye needles would work. We used to use these collapsible eye needles, but I haven't been able to find them lately. So whatever you can do to make this easier, because you will find the odd bead, like that one's got a really tiny hole, and I might struggle getting that in there, and it can get super frustrating. If you have a little reamer, you can kind of poke it through to try to make life easier. But what I usually do, if I haven't stiffened my cording up, is just cut it on another sharp angle. And then usually it will pop right in there. And if that doesn't work, then sometimes getting really mad at it and swearing helps. Whatever you have to do to make it work. So you can see this one is going to be a bear, and I'm going to really struggle with it. But there we go. It got on there. So when there's a will, there's a way. So I'm just going to continue putting these on one side, and then I'll be right back. So now you can see that I've got my wood beads on one side. So I've started with the 8/0 seed bead, and I've put all of my wood beads on and then an 8/0 seed bead in between each one, and I've ended with an 8/0. So one of the things that I found that did work a little bit is to take your tweezers and kind of pop them in there and use them as a bit of a reamer. Some of these drill holes are very tiny on these, and they're not usually like that, but you know, the odd strand comes out like that. So that really helps open that up, because this can get a little frustrating if you haven't stiffened the ends. And you know, see, I didn't, and then now I'm really frustrated. So you might have to ream them out, and that just makes it so much easier to pop that right through there. So I'm going to continue on the other side. So I'm going to be putting on my seed beads and my wood beads, and I will be right back when I've got those all on there. So one of the things you want to make sure if you are sort of reaming them out is you don't push too hard. I was pushing too hard on this, and I did break the wood. We are going to give you a couple extra pieces of wood, but you do have to be careful when you're going in there that you're just sort of being very gentle with it and not pushing too hard. All right, so I have both of my sides done with my beads and my seed beads. So that was a little bit frustrating because I didn't take the time to make the ends stiff with a little bit of glue. So do as I say and not as I do, because man, I tell you, sometimes I try to do things in a hurry because I'm always in a hurry for filming and it ends up going against me because I did not take care of the ends. It's just the drill holes are very small in these. So make sure that you do take the time or to stiffen that up, or to use a needle of some sort. Okay, so now we are going to finish this off. So I want to make sure these are sort of pushed down on both the ends, but I'm going to work with one end at a time. So I want to create a knot right next to this piece, but I'm going to leave just a little teeny tiny, about a 1/16 of an inch gap. And that's because this needs a little bit of room to tuck in there, but I really don't want to leave too much of a gap. You don't want to have it so tight that this doesn't have any flow to it, so it's about finding that sweet spot. So I'll kind of show you what I'm going to do here. So I make my knot around my finger, and you can see right here, I'll try and drop that over, that's about where I'm going to put my first knot. So I'm going to create one knot there, and then sort of push that down a bit. Now you'll see that it kind of looks like it smushes right up there, but it doesn't. Now I'm going to create another knot. We're going to do a couple knots here, and then I'm going to take my tweezers and put it right over top of that first knot. So I'm not going above or below, I'm just going right on top of the knot. I sort of want these knots to all stack on top of each other, and I'm not going to bother pushing that one down. Now I'm going to make a third one and do the exact same thing. So I just make my knot around my finger, and then I'm going to take my tweezers and place it right over top of the knot there. You can see the knot is underneath my tweezers, and then I'm going to tighten up on top there. So that'll essentially give us 3 knots on top of each other and just kind of tighten that up. So now I'm going to take a little drop of GS Hypo and just place it right on top of that knot. I just need a little bit on there. So I'm going to let that dry, and then now I'm going to repeat on the other side. So I go around my fingers, pull that through, and then take my tweezer and place it right where I want that knot, which is about a 1/16 of an inch away from that bead. But now you can see I forgot to push that down. So let's move that down. There we go. And then now I'm going to tighten that up. And I'm going to push that one down a little bit just to kind of lock that in there. Now I'm going to make another one around my fingers. So always pull through, and then I take my tweezers and go through that loop, and now I'm going to go right over top of that knot there. So you're just stacking your knots. And what we're trying to do really, I mean, one, we're trying to finish it off, but the other is that we are trying to make it bulky enough so that there's something to sit inside those bead tips. So make my loop and then go through and then grab hold of that knot and then stack that third knot up on top there and then kind of pull that down. All right, now I'm going to put a little drop of glue on there. And I'm just going to kind of put it where I'm cutting that off, because I want to make sure that this knot doesn't come apart. I mean, it shouldn't, but I want to make sure that it doesn't. Okay, so now I've let that dry for a little bit, so I can come in and I can clip this off. And then now we're just left with this little nub. So now I'm going to take our bead tip and I'm going to just lay that inside there and just close it up with my fingers. You can take a pair of your pliers and kind of gently push it together, but I don't want to flatten that little tip there. And the main thing with these is you want to make sure that the 2 holes are aligned. So sometimes I have to come in on the side like this and just gently kind of push it so that they align up, but that one actually worked really well. So now I'm going to come in on this one and give that a little trim. And again, scissors would work a lot better than cutters, but you know me, I never have scissors, so that's just kind of the way that I go. All right, so now we are going to take our next one. And again, oops, I've got a bead inside there. So you just take it and kind of line it up, and then you can just close with your fingers. So nice. And then again, just make sure that that little hole, those two holes are lined up like that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is work with our leather. Now this is meant to be a long necklace, and this one I'm on the plus size, so it does hang down just below the bust line, which is right where I wanted it to be. I had one of my girls try it on, and it was a little bit longer on her, and she's super tiny, and she said it was like the perfect length. But you can adjust this however you want. It does end up being about 27 inches long just in the necklace part, and that doesn't include the pendant. So really you'll have to adjust as to, your preference. So with the leather, you're getting 22 inches of leather. So we're going to cut that in half, and we're going to work with what we've got here. So now I'm going to put on my bead ends. So now you might have seen me work with this before. Now I think when you're working with the leather is that you want to make it flow the natural way. So I don't want to try and fight it and have it go sideways like that. It just never lays properly. So now we do carry these in 2mm, but I wanted a little bit more bulk. So I'm using the 3mm, and you can see it is pretty roomy in there, but it works fine. So I'm going to make sure that this is in the natural flow, and that's the way that that's going. And then I'm going to put this on top, and I want to have it going across like that. And then I know it's going to sit right. So what I do is I get my pliers, I put it on top, I sort of push the leather up, and then I pull back just so that you can't see it. And I give it a little crunch there, scrunch, whatever we're going to call it. So just go in between. You never want to go in the outside pieces, just on the inside pieces. If it does worry you a little bit, you could put a drop of glue, but I've yet to ever have one of these come off, and I've used them for years. Okay, so we've got that on one side, and now we're going to put that on the other side. So again, just pop it on the end, line it up, make sure it's on the natural flow, pop your leather up so you can see it, and then kind of pull back, so because we don't want to see that leather, but I want to make sure that it gets in there in the right place, and then kind of give a little crunch on it. Now I wouldn't really worry too much if you can see a little bit of the leather popping out there. No one's going to actually see it. So okay, so now we are going to take these and attach them. So I'm going to take one of my jump rings. So now this is an 18 gauge 4mm jump ring. And you know that I always like to use this size because it's nice and strong, and it is a nice heavy gauge, but it's small. Okay, so we're going to open it up by going opposite directions, and then I'm going to run that through the end of one of these bead tips, and then I'm going to put this on. So you want to make sure you're going the right way. Like I don't want to go this way because then it's going to sort of wreck that natural flow. So I'm going to turn it this way so it's kind of flowing inwards. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second here. So make sure when you do up your jump rings that you kind of twist them back and forth until it locks right in there. So now you can see when I'll move all this out of the way, that this is flowing inwards. Okay, and now I'm going to repeat on the other side. So I'm going to get one of my jump rings and open that up, and then go through the end. And you have to kind of jiggle them in there a little bit. And then making sure that this is going in the natural flow, because that's kind of the way that our necks go. They're rounded that way. And then do that up nice and tight. Now this is at the point where you're going to want to decide how long that you want it. What I would do is I would just take this and sort of wrap it around my neck and see where it's going to end. The end cords and things that we're going to add are going to add about an extra ½ an inch on there. So you sort of have to take that into account. But if you want it this length, you're just going to carry on. Otherwise, you're going to measure it and decide if you need to trim this leather. So I'm just going to use this length. So again, I'm going to watch the natural flow. And we're doing that so that I don't put this on, say, this way. Sometimes people ask, why do I do that? Because then everything's going to sit wrong. So I want to make sure that it's turned the right way. And then I'm going to pop my pliers on there and give it a good crimp in the middle. And then I turn it over and crimp that, and then repeat on the other one. I'm going to just pop that on, line that up, and then give it a good crimp. Okay. So normally I would make sure that this was sitting the right direction, but you know, it doesn't really matter on this particular necklace because this is going to turn around a little bit when you're wearing it. So if you are worried about it, you could get it sort of lined up to make sure that it is going the way that you want. So that looks like it would lay on me the way that I want. So now I'm going to put on my ends here. So I've got one of my jump rings again. So open that up. And I'm going to run it through the end and then put on my lobster clasp. So now I'm right-handed, so I always put my lobster clasp on the right side because I figure that's easier to do up. If you're left-handed, just turn it the other way. So and just make sure that that is in there nice and tight. And then I always end my necklaces with a closed jump ring because I feel like that gives you not only a nicer look, but it's way more secure. So we're going to put that jump ring on there, and then I've got a closed ring there. And I just use a small one. I think this is a 6mm, but you can see when you do it up, it gives you a really nice finished look. It looks like something that you would buy in a jewelry store. So I'm just going to clear this all off and show you the completed piece. All right, so there you go. There's our completed piece. Now, of course, necklaces always look a whole lot nicer when they're hanging versus just laying on a flat surface, but I still think you can get a fairly good idea of how this is going to look on. I think it is just a beautiful flow of materials, and it's such a beautiful, calming kind of color. So this will be available in kit form. Just go into the description box below the video, and there will be a link that will take you to my fully secure website where we will have the kit. We will also have some of these parts available. I don't have a couple of these on there, but you could buy the pendant and of course the beads and the leather and the crimps. If you remember back a few videos ago, I mentioned that I would love to get to 100,000 subscribers this year. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please make sure that you do so. If you love this video, please make sure to give me a like and leave me a comment, as I love to hear from everybody. I want to thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you on the next one.